everyone. This is Gary London, Senior Principal with London Moeder Advisors. And I am here with Ricardo Flores in San Diego, who is local head of an organization called LISC. And he's going to tell you about who he is, what he does, and give you more detail in terms of his biography. But let me just start this out, Ricardo, by telling everybody why we're having a conversation. The reason we're having a conversation is because you are about to promote a very interesting idea, which my partner Nathan Moeder and I wholly support and are going to lobby with you to achieve, which is to create higher density housing in neighborhoods. But wait, there's more. It's not just about taking single family lots and building apartment projects, which has sort of been the platform of the infill approach that the city of San Diego and many other cities in Southern California have taken. No, this is about trying to achieve housing for what we call the missing middle, which are largely families, couples with children who might want to have children, who are basically priced out of the single family home market all over Southern California and the coastal markets all over the West Coast because it's too expensive. And what's happening in terms of population movement is because these people in great amounts of numbers cannot afford to live here, to buy a home here, they leave. And the exit numbers demonstrate that. Ultimately, that becomes an economic crisis for coastal California. So the question is, how do we cure that? And the biggest cost of living issue that these people have is housing. And what your proposal is, and what we agree with, is let's not just take housing, single-family neighborhoods, and sort of radically change the character of those communities and build a bunch of apartments in them. That's not what this proposal is. The proposal is simply to take single-family lots and subdivide them into smaller lots so that you can achieve the density of what we call townhomes or row homes, which are accommodatable for families. But what are you doing with this density? You're essentially cutting out the cost of the land because you're using smaller footprint, but you're going a little bit vertical. Instead of 1 story, you're going 2 stories, sometimes 3 stories, to get interior space that is essentially the same size interior space as single family homes, but you're eliminating front yards and backyards. Presumably there's a park or a schoolyard down the block that can deal with that issue. And the most important thing is you're cutting the cost of the house way down because you're cutting the land out of the deal. And you're minimally not changing the character actually at all of single family neighborhoods by just adding a little bit of density, which will accommodate the same demographic cohort, the same families as were originally accommodated in most of these neighborhoods when baby boomers like me were buying these homes back in the 70s and 80s, even the 90s. It's the same people. There's just the younger version of the same people. So what we're doing is we're opening up housing for these people. So anyway, that's the proposal that you made, that you're about to aggressively make to the policymakers. And with that, by way of long introduction, tell everybody who you are.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity to chat with you and for your support on this incredible idea. But yeah, no, my name is Ricardo Flores. I'm the executive director of a group called the Local Initiative Support Corporation, also known as LISC San Diego. And we are a nonprofit community development financial institution, or CDFI. All credit unions are CDFIs, but we are a non-depository, and our money actually comes from banks because of their CRA obligations. And essentially, we provide that money as loans to affordable housing developers for pre-dev to buy a site, take it down, and all that. So we understand what we're talking about, and that's what's really important, I think, about what we're saying. But in this particular instance, we're really interested in providing for sale opportunities that do not have affordability covenants and things like that, because the folks that we're interested in providing this housing to, they want to own the home. They don't want to own part of a home, a piece of a home. They want to own the whole home. And so again, we need to be able to figure out how to accommodate for that, because you may live in an affordable housing complex, but what are you going to aspire to? And the idea being that you're in affordable housing and at some point you transition out, well, where do you go? And that's really important, right? So that we can continually build affordable housing for families that really need it or individuals that really need it. But as we all know, it's very, very expensive to build affordable housing. So if a family has cash flow and they have the ability to support a mortgage, maybe not $1 million mortgage, we want them to have the opportunity for home ownership. And that's where this idea comes in.
Well, as an economist who does a lot of pro formas on housing projects, there are what we call the factors of production: labor, materials, capital, and land. And of those factors of production, particularly in urban areas, it's the land cost that matters the most. So this effort to sort of take the land out of the deal is sort of the biggest factor here that interests me. Why don't you put up, oh, let me ask you this question. Tell me how you got this idea. What were you looking at?
So, really what I was trying to figure out is how do we build for sale homes, again, that are not as expensive as the traditional $1 million home. And, I started to really understand that 5,000 square feet of land is a lot of land. In fact, it's the size of a basketball court. And through that process of saying, well, what happens if you make it smaller? Common sense, then you buy less land. And that's the journey that we need to engage in going forward. And then the next question is, because a lot of people have never seen this on the West Coast, well, how much can you put on 1,000 square feet of land? You certainly can't put a big home. You have to make a small home, and that's not necessarily true. And one of the things I discovered was that the city of LA had passed years ago what was called the small lot subdivision ordinance that allows exactly what we're talking about here. The thing is, the city of LA only allows it in multifamily areas. So it's utilized, but not as utilized. But because, and actually the city of San Diego passed a very similar thing, I think in 2016. I don't think it's ever really been utilized. But because LA is so big and folks try different things, what I found in LA was that architects and others were really kind of interested in this idea and this product. And so they built accordingly. And so there are products that we can see in LA that give us a feel. Because the other thing all San Diegans are aware of is we tried to do this with Ray Huffman and others. Unfortunately, we destroyed the sidewalks, we destroyed tree canopies, and we didn't accommodate for parking. And what I saw in LA was the opposite. The sidewalk was intact. The tree canopy was still there. What you had as a driveway, one ingress and egress was still the same. The parking was on the premises. So for all intents and purposes, if you were just walking down the street, you would not really know what was there. But if you really look closely, you'd see 4 families living where one family was living, and living not in 1,000 square feet, but living in a 2,000 square foot home, which has all the amenities of a home. It just, like you said, it doesn't have a front yard and it doesn't have a backyard. But again, if we can show families what this looks like and what the cost is, then we can go backwards and we can say, oh, you want that front yard? Well, this is what the cost will be. Oh, you want that backyard? This is what the cost will be. And I think
Show me what it looks like. Show me.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an architect firm that I actually just kind of Googled and found. It's called Crimmins Design. And this was initially, this is the plans, that how it looks from up top. And just north of here is actually a 3-bedroom, 3-bath home. Now this is in Los Feliz, California. The project is a beautiful project.
Which is the neighborhood of Los Angeles.
It's a neighborhood of Los Angeles, multifamily. But again, you can see, so this is probably about a little more than 5,000 square feet, but you can see it's comfortably fitting 2 cars, 2,000 square feet. And again, for the public's concern, there's your sidewalk, there's your tree canopy, and you still have your one driveway, right? And so again, that's the beautiful thing. And then if you look at some of the pictures, again, we're not talking about, this is an expensive project, but we're not talking about people having to live in an inferior type of a product. They're living in a very beautiful product. It just so happens they don't have that outdoor space. But again, that's a decision they can make, right? Because right now, because of government's mandates of 5,000 square feet of land, that's not a decision people can make.
So take a look at this one. So essentially, you're seeing relatively low scale. We call it density, but it's relatively low scale densities, easily under the definition of townhome or a row home. It's just a way more efficient way to accommodate families in the middle market in a single family home neighborhood. Now, it would require, wouldn't it, Ricardo, the most usually the aggregation of more than one lot. I mean, you show this on one lot, but probably from an economic scaling perspective, most developers would want to, build on a couple of contiguous lots so they can get enough units in.
Absolutely. And again, that's the whole goal, is really for government to be able to say, okay, you can look at land differently, because folks like your clients and others will say, okay, let's figure out a way to do that. But to do that, I need to have more flexibility. And that's really the whole goal here, is flexibility. Your people that are not in California may be surprised to know 81% of the city of San Diego is zoned for one thing and one thing only, a single family home. And that means you have to buy or rent 5,000 square feet of land and the home on top of it.
Do you have any other good pictures here?
Yeah, let's see. So again, here we're seeing from the front perspective, right? And so look, you have a little wall here again that creates that privacy. Your parking is all on the premises. So again, the concern of, oh, you're going to park everywhere in the neighborhood. And number one on this, why wouldn't a family value parking? So we've got to figure out a way to provide that for them on something like this. And this is just kind of and again, this is another perspective. And this is exactly as you said, it's light density. It's not huge density. And it's for home ownership in this case. And I think that's the missing piece here, because as you were articulating earlier, I think policymakers have looked at one piece of land and they said, how many apartments can we put on them? And there's value in that. But I also think there's real value in being specific and saying, how can we look at this for home ownership, not just for rental opportunities? And so again.
So let's go off the screen now and back. So let me just infuse at this point a full confession. I actually own a what we call a row home in San Diego. It's in downtown San Diego. I've owned it for over 20 years. It was built in 2003, and it was designed by local architect Kevin DeFreitas. And it's a tilt-up concrete project. It's built in, of all places, downtown San Diego. But it's a single-family home. It is one of 17 units on 1/3 of a downtown block, so basically 20,000 feet. And I think this unit sits on maybe 700 of those feet. And the unit is 3 stories and it's 2,000 feet. Now, I don't know how you were raised, but I was raised in a single family home
Same here.
in Sonoma County. And I think that home was about 1,400 square feet, may have been 1,600 feet. And I was part of a family of 5 and a dog. And we had a big front yard, a big backyard and a front yard. So it was a traditional home. But what we're talking about with respect to my row home, for instance, is the same interior square footage. It's just missing the lots. And in most it's just missing the land in the backyard and the front yard. So in most neighborhoods, that's not a big deal, because neighborhoods have parks and they have schools and so forth. So it's not a big stretch to think about this concept. It's not a heavy lift as a policy issue, is it, Ricardo?
Not at all. In fact, what I like to tell folks is just a change of imagination, right? Einstein didn't develop relativity. He saw it for what it is. This is just changing it, because we're so wedded to this idea that a single family home has to be on 5,000 square feet. And most of us don't even know why it's 5,000 square feet, because it certainly has nothing to do with the capacity of the developing industry or the health and safety of the public. That's just a number. And so again, it's just the idea of changing our thinking about how we provide housing and how people can live. And I suspect, because this will happen eventually, we're going to look back and we're going to say, why were we so wedded to 5,000 square feet? What was it about 5,000 square feet? And I live in Kensington, and it's a beautiful neighborhood. But I will tell you, on a beautiful afternoon, on a Saturday or Sunday, there are some people walking, but not many. And most people have beautiful front yards, but those front yards are not providing for them. They're actually putting money into their front yards in the form of water and other maintenance. but that front yard has no value that they're capturing. And that's the problem here in California. And I also like to say to policymakers is, look, however we feel about policymakers, the business community, education, everyone has done such a great job in San Diego of really making San Diego attractive to be and to live and to find opportunity. So now it stands to reason that the land has real value, right? Because people want to be here. Now we have to make it smaller to consume because that value continues to increase. And so again, this is a natural trajectory, I think, of what we're on. But again, what stands in the way of this progress is the memories of the past, right? You had a childhood in single family. I had a child in single family. But what we're proposing here isn't drastic. It's that natural infill that, if anything, just like single family homes in my neighborhood, most people are going to pass this on to their own family, or they're going to subdivide, or they're going to provide opportunity for their own family before they do others. So again, it really makes sense. And then the other argument too that folks oftentimes are concerned about is, well, you're adding people to my neighborhood, but you're not creating the infrastructure in the parks. Well, we don't have the money to do that in San Diego, and it's very, very evident. But if we provide more home ownership for people, they're paying those property taxes, and those property taxes go back into those services.
Yeah, the property tax is a big deal because it's always a challenge for city treasuries to meet their budget, and to add to the property tax base is a big fiscal push. I also wanted to point out that when it's important that we use the example of Los Angeles, because when I drive around West LA, whether it be Santa Monica or the other side of the 405 and some of those sort of suburban/urban neighborhoods, you see all kinds of different density projects there, and they really haven't changed the neighborhoods. In fact, and you can make the argument, which you sort of just made with respect to Kensington, that they enrich the neighborhood. More people are there, more people on the streets, but it's not super urban. It's just a little bit more urban. And the upside is a couple of things. One is you accommodate a lot more people, which is a goal here, and you do it at a lesser price, and you do it targeting a segment of our population which we are rapidly losing. And in a sense, while LA still has this, issues because you just can't build enough housing, it's at least a way to try to be responsive to that. Because what we're not doing, the elephant in the room sort of issue here, is we're not developing on greenfields anymore in places like San Diego County. Now, these are policy issues, and that's another whole subject. But the reality is that for developers, greenfields are not available anymore. We used to accommodate our growth in San Diego by building out, by building master plan communities. I made a living doing feasibility studies on projects, mostly beginning with the name Rancho, that build housing in increments of 1, 2, 3, 10,000 units. We're not in that business anymore. Those developers don't exist anymore. So but yet those accommodated the same kind of demographic in their time that you're talking about today, don't they? So what we're really saying is that this is an infill solution. It's not going to solve all the world's problems. Some families don't want to live like this, but many will be quite accommodatable here. And it's not like we're coming out of the dark ages here. I mean, LA is doing it, but the whole East Coast has accommodated this kind of a market for years. The row homes, the brownstones, and so forth are ways that many people grew up perfectly fine. So that's sort of what attracts me about the solution. So having said all of that, having had this conversation, so what are we going to do next? How are you going to sort of get everybody's attention to this concept?
So I think we need to go to our policymakers because, as you know, your clients and many of the people you work with and the folks that I work with, we consider land a fixed cost, all right? It's just, that's what it is, and we move forward. For policymakers, though, they decide that fixed cost. And so for them to clearly understand that they could allow families to purchase 1,000 square feet of land instead of 5,000 square feet of land, and the difference called middle income housing. And oh, by the way, that's going to go back to your property taxes. That's going to increase your services and your infrastructure. It's that virtuous cycle. And again, they don't have to, there's not a big giant cost for them to allow people to subdivide their land.
So maybe the
It's,
way to do this is to start it as a demonstration project in a neighborhood.
I
And
think
just so
so.
people can get a comfort level with the concept. And if some of these projects are built, they'll see that it hasn't destroyed neighborhoods or changed the character or the traditional character of the neighborhoods. We get sort of the bugs out of any of the policies that directed this, and then we can move on to other neighborhoods. So a demonstration project.
I agree. And the other thing too is really to allow the city and those who make decisions in the city and the bureaucracy and others to understand how some of their requirements or some of their needs affect housing prices. And so again, if you're looking at a family that's going to buy a parcel of land or that's going to live and be a homeowner, why are we charging fees and other hookups? They're going to be paying property taxes. And so how can we start to get the cities and others to understand that let's work together. And oh, by the way, if it takes you 2 more months to do this, this is the cost now for this family. Or if you can't make a decision quick enough, this is the cost for the family. They need to see it in real time. And I think for them too, they want to be part of a solution, right? They want to know that they're not just the holdup here. So it's really a very common sense approach. And something you said that was really interesting earlier about, places that we can see this. If you go to the beach communities, all of our beach communities, and you drive along the coast, you will see a lot of different housing. In fact, Coronado, if you go to Coronado, and instead of going to the Hotel Del, you go left, and then you hit the light and you go left and you look at the neighborhood, you will see single family homes, row homes, homes behind homes. We know, we see this in our beach communities. And I've kind of sheepishly said, if it's good enough for our beach communities, it's good enough for all of us. Because in Southern California, that's the ideal place, is the beach and the communities there. But again, it is going to take a different way of looking at it. And, you're mentioning ranchos. My parents are born and raised in San Diego. When they bought their first home in City Heights for a very low number, and then they wanted to move and accommodate for a growing family, my sister. And so they moved to Rancho San Diego. And that's where I was born and brought up.
And I did the
There,
feasibility study on that project.
did you? Oh my gosh. So yeah, it's amazing
Yeah.
because and then my dad told me, he said, because they were in education, he said, well, we had some friends that also had lived more in an urban environment and they wanted to go to a more suburban feel, and they went to a place called Scripps Ranch.
Right.
It just so happens that there is no where to go anymore.
So what do we need to change in terms of city codes, planning codes to get this rolling?
So to be honest with you, the mayor of San Diego proposed this exact idea in his last housing action plan. And he was able to utilize it under some of the laws that are currently in place with the state to allow for subdivision in a ministerial fashion. So it's really just bringing forth that proposal and passing it. That's really what it's going to take. It's really, we don't need to go to Sacramento, because Sacramento's given us the key to do it. We just need to put the key in the lock and open it. And then, like you said, I think it's really impressing upon folks in the industry that we're a part of to really show what it can look like, and to really tantalize the public by saying, you see this 2000 3-bedroom home, brand new garage, everything. This is the new cost, and this is where it's located. Because I believe that once the public sees this and feels this, they're going to want one.
So
And that's the imagination we got to change.
let me just ask perhaps one last question, or make one last point, which is, what does this do to values in the neighborhood? In other words, if my neighbor subdivided their lot, what do we think is going to happen to housing values in the neighborhood?
Well, it's interesting because what we're trying to do here is to provide more property rights to those exact homeowners. And so if you provide more property rights, that can translate into larger property value.
So the irony of
The
this
irony.
is that while you're providing more affordable housing
Yes.
for those lots which are being subdivided,
Smaller. That's
you're
right.
actually increasing the value
Yes.
of the
Yes.
existing single family homes, because
That's
a
right.
developer will pay more for that home.
That's right.
They can substitute that one home for 4, 5, or 10 other homes.
Let alone a homeowner, depending on the size of their property, can liquidate pieces of their property for hard cash
Yeah.
that a bank will pay for, right? So you're really providing homeowners an opportunity to look at the most important investment that they have, their property,
Yeah.
and to utilize it in a much more efficient way, while at the same time, like you just said, helping solve our housing crisis, but also providing a pathway to prosperity for the next generation.
Well, I think that
Can't
uh,
make this up.
no, and I, honestly, as I've been thinking about this over the last few weeks with you, I think there's very little hair on this deal. I think
There really
that
isn't.
people who are generally reluctant to accommodate density should be much warmer to this idea. I think that there's upside to the city fiscally. I think there's upside to property owners financially. I
Mhm.
think there's an opportunity to at least get some housing for the key demographic that we're failing to accommodate now, missing middle
Mhm.
and families.
Mhm.
I think this is a gold star solution.
It really is. And again, what's the cost to the taxpayer? Nothing, because all we're doing is allowing you to use the land that you already have differently. So we're not saying we need $100 million to do this. And most importantly, we are relying upon the market,
Yeah.
right? Because the more people that build, the costs come down. And the other thing too is, imagine all of these homeowners are going to need appliances, they're going to need furniture, they're going to need
It's an
insurance.
economic,
All that is right. And also the really important thing is that when you have a mortgage, you have rent control, you have predictability. So what does that allow you to do? It allows you to consume more higher end products. And again, that's what our economy, as you know, is based on. So there really isn't a loser here at all. But yes, is it
oh, don't get me wrong. There will always be people that oppose even the best
Oh
idea.
yeah,
That's a
of course.
whole nother interview. But um, that's okay, because I
Yeah.
think that your explainer strategy here, your convincer strategy is strong enough where we're going to get sufficient good results that there'll be people that will never be able to convince. But you can't please all the people all the time. And I think this is a very, very interesting proposal. And Ricardo, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about it. Good luck in the coming weeks and months as you push this at the city of San Diego, maybe later at other cities. And you certainly have the support of my partner, Nathan Moeder, and myself. Will do everything we can to help push this along.
Well, and for folks that are listening, Google us and send me an email and say, hey, we support this, right? Because the more people that say this is common sense, this makes sense, that's important because we are pushing a rock up a hill, and that we are trying to create a world that does not yet exist, right? And that's a little nerve-wracking and scary, but the opportunity is there, and to be able to accomplish it and to be able to provide for that new world and that new young generation,
Change,
there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah, change is scary. And as a final word, you do look a little bit like Albert Einstein.
It's funny. Actually, you say that my dad, well, I look like my father who looks like Albert Einstein too. So,
So take the credit, and
hey,
hopefully you're the genius here and can solve the issue.
well, as you know, Gary, my background is actually in film. And so every now and then my wife tells me, do you know what you're talking about? And I say, well, honey, I just talk to smart people like Gary. And if they tell me something's wrong, then I'll revise it.
I am going to end this conversation on that point. I like that. Thanks again, Ricardo.
Thank you.